This is the unit on evaluating syllogisms. In the last unit, we learned what syllogisms are and how to identify them, and we saw the standard form of expressing syllogisms. Here we're going to learn a systematic method for evaluating syllogisms as to their validity. And the method is simple. It's based on these simple 4 rules. But to understand the rules, there are a couple of concepts that you're going to have to understand as well. So first we'll review the rules, then we'll explain the concepts, then we'll go back to the rules, and then we will practice on some examples, applying the rules to determine whether they're valid or invalid. Okay, so the rules are as follows. For a syllogism to be valid, it must follow all 4 of them. 1. There must be at least one affirmative premise. Recall from the unit before last that there were 4 types of categorical propositions. And from the previous unit, we learned that all the premises and the conclusion of a syllogism are categorical propositions. Those 4 types of categorical propositions were, again, the universal affirmative, the universal negative, the existential affirmative, and the existential negative. So in this rule that says there must be at least one affirmative premise, the reference is to that type of categorical proposition. That would be either of the form all S is P or some S is P. So the rule is that at least one of the premises of the argument has to be affirmative. The second rule is that if there is a negative premise, the conclusion must be negative. And if the conclusion is negative, there must be a negative premise. So we already know what we need to know to understand those 2 rules. It will become clear when we apply them. The third rule requires new concepts that we're going to discuss momentarily. That is that the middle term must be distributed at least once. And the 4th rule is that whatever is distributed in the conclusion must be distributed in the premises. So this requires us to understand what the middle term is and what it is for a term to be distributed. Okay, so the middle term is the term which is not found in the conclusion. So here is an example now of a syllogism, right? We have, again, 2 categorical premises and 1 categorical conclusion, right? And we can see that in bold here we have 1 term. Again, every proposition has the 2 terms, the subject and the predicate, right? Here we have in bold the middle term, right? The term which is in each premise, but it's not in the conclusion. So that is human beings, right? All human beings are mortal. All prophets are human beings. Therefore, all prophets are mortal. Okay? There has to be a middle term, and a syllogism and the middle term must be in both premises, or there will be no logical connection between the 2 premises that will lead us to the conclusion. Yeah. So in this example, human beings is the middle term, and you can see how it forms a logical bridge, we might say, figuratively, between the other terms. That's the terms mortal and prophets. That's the bridge that links the premises to the conclusion. Okay. So again, the middle term is the term which is not found in the conclusion of the syllogism, right? All you have to do is look at the conclusion, look at the premises, and there should be a term which is in both premises but is not in the conclusion. That is the middle term. Okay, so the rule said that the middle term has to be distributed at least once. And that means we have to understand what distribution is. Okay, so a term is distributed in a proposition when the proposition says something about every member of the category to which the term applies. Right? So here's a proposition. All intoxicants are haram. Yeah. Now we have 2 terms in the proposition, intoxicants and haram. Yeah, and our definition says that a term is distributed in a proposition when the proposition says something about every member of the category to which the term refers. So we just asked the question, does this proposition say something about all intoxicants? Well, yes, it's right there. All intoxicants are haram. Therefore, according to the definition of distribution we have here, intoxicants is distributed, right? The term intoxicants is distributed in this proposition, okay? We're not saying that the term intoxicants is distributed just in itself. No, it's distributed in this proposition. So it all depends again on what the proposition is and what the proposition is saying about that category, right, that the term stands for. Because of the fact that this proposition says all intoxicants are haram, therefore it is telling us something about every member of the category to which the term intoxicants refers. And therefore, intoxicants as a term in this proposition is distributed in this proposition. Does this proposition say something about all haram things? Well, no, right? It tells us that all intoxicants are haram, but there wouldn't be anything there that it could be telling us about haram things except for that they are intoxicants. But it's certainly not saying that all haram things are intoxicants, right? It's saying that all intoxicants are haram, right? From the fact that all intoxicants are haram, it doesn't follow that all haram things are intoxicants. A lot of other things are haram that are not intoxicants, right? And so this proposition is not telling you something about every haram thing. It's telling you about every intoxicant. Therefore, haram in this term is not in this proposition. In this proposition, the term haram is not distributed. Okay. Okay, so again, distribution. Look at this next proposition. No intoxicant is halal. So now we ask the same question. This is a new proposition. So the question whether the term intoxicant is distributed in it is a new question. Remember, a term is distributed in a proposition. It's not distributed by itself. So we're talking about what the proposition does with the term. Does it distribute to the term, right? And in this case, we have to ask the question again, is the term intoxicant distributed by the proposition no intoxicant is halal? Right? Is it telling us something about every intoxicant? Well, again, the answer here is yes. It's telling us that every intoxicant is not halal, right? That follows from the no intoxicant is halal. That follows from the fact that in the language we learned 2 units ago, this is a universal proposition. It's a universal negative proposition, right? That it's universal, we say it's universal precisely because it is saying something about every member of the category, that it's referring to directly here. This is different than the previous one, though, because in this case, halal, the other term in the proposition, is also distributed. Yeah, it is telling us something about every halal thing. It's telling us that none of them are intoxicants, right? So they're all not intoxicants. So when we say that no intoxicant is halal, this proposition is saying that no thing in the category of intoxicant is halal, and no thing in the category of halal things is an intoxicant. So both terms are distributed in this proposition. All right, so here's another one to practice this definition of distribution on and apply the concept of distribution. Some Muslims get high anyway. Okay, does this proposition say something about all Muslims? Well, no, because obviously there it says some Muslims. Some is not all, right? Does it say something about everyone who gets high? No, it doesn't tell us that everyone who gets high is a Muslim. So the proposition does not say something about all Muslims, and it does not say something about all people who gets high, right? It says something about some Muslims and therefore about some people who get high, right? So neither the term Muslim nor gets high are distributed in this proposition. Okay, and another one. Other Muslims do not get high. Does this proposition say something about all Muslims? The answer to that question is no, right? Again, that's just some Muslims. Some Muslims do, and some Muslims do not. Here's the tricky part. Does the proposition say something about everyone who gets high? Well, in this case, it does, right? It says other Muslims do not get high. And so, even though it doesn't seem obvious, it's the case that this proposition is saying something about every member of the category of people who get high, right? And that none of them are some Muslims, right? So if we take this category of the Muslims who do not get high, which is just some of them, none of the people who get high are these Muslims, right? So it does tell us something about all of the members of the category of the term here that get high. Yeah. So the term Muslim is not distributed here, but the term gets high is distributed. Okay. So here are 4 examples that we use to apply and illustrate this concept of distribution on, okay? And we can just make a chart now. Yeah, so those 4 examples that we showed you, kind of we'll go back again, right? All intoxicants are haram. Remember from the 4 types of categorical propositions, this is the form all S is P. This is the form no S is P. This is of the form some S is P. And this is of the form some S is not P. And so we have that here, right? And basically you have 4 types of categorical propositions, and in each case, one of the terms or another of the terms or both or neither is distributed. And so you just have, now 8 possibilities or 8 different, categories here. Yeah, so for each of these propositions, you have 2 terms, and you can just make your chart by filling in into the space for each term, whether it's distributed in that proposition or not. So you can make an easy to use chart which lists the 4 types of categorical propositions and which will indicate which of the 2 terms in that proposition is distributed or not. And you can use this later for applying the rules. So I'll give you a few minutes to fill in the chart, which should be easy to do based on what we have already learned. But just remember, when you fill in the chart, again, a term is distributed in a proposition if the proposition says something about every member of the category to which the term refers. Okay, so go ahead and fill this chart in. You can pause the video and fill it in, and then restart the video when you're finished. This should be the answer that you got. In the categorical proposition of the form all S is P, S is distributed, but P is not. In the categorical proposition of the form no S is P, S is distributed and P is distributed. They're both distributed. And the proposition of the type some S is P, neither term is distributed. And in the proposition of the form some S is not P, P is distributed only, but not S. All right, so keep that chart and keep it handy with you. It might be useful. And soon you'll be able to just remember it. And if you understand, again, what distribution is, you won't even need a chart. But distribution, again, is that a term is distributed in a proposition if the proposition says something about every member of the category to which the term applies. So back to the rules again. For a syllogism to be valid, it must follow all 4 of these rules. First, there must be at least one affirmative premise. Second, if there is a negative premise, the conclusion must be negative, and if the conclusion is negative, there must be a negative premise. 3, the middle term must be distributed at least once. And 4, whatever is distributed in the conclusion must be distributed in the premises. Okay.